I think we're gonna go ahead and get started. I don't see anyone else in the waiting room, so we're gonna go ahead and get started. Hi, everyone. My name is Julia Stover, and I'm your Indiana Hostess State President. Welcome to our session for State Officer Candidacy for this year's Winter Rally. I'm very glad that you all decided to attend and that you have an interest in being a state officer. So, in this presentation, we're going to talk a little bit about the election process and what the candidacy is like. So, let's go ahead and get started. So, first, we're going to talk about the election packets. The election packet has many things in it, but the that you're going to see in the election packet is the application or nomination form. And this form is just going to go over what your name is, what your email is, your home phone number. But it's also going to go over some of the things like what are some of your achievements and did you hold a local office? That's what this nomination form is for. There's also an employer memo of understanding. If you're not employed and you don't have a job, you don't really have to worry about this. But if you are employed, your employer needs to know that you plan on running for office and that you'll have to take some time off. So that's what this memo of understanding is for. There's also a travel policies agreement. Excuse me, Indiana HOSA does occasionally travel. So we need to know that you're willing to take the time off, take the time from school, and travel with us for some of our state conferences that we have. You'll also have to have two of recommendation. You will have to have one from your advisor as well as someone who is a non-family member. So this could be a teacher, a counselor, whoever you trust to give you a good recommendation. There's also an introductory video. This introductory video is really no longer than 5 minutes at most, but it's just going to give us a better example of who you are, just get to know you better, things like that. There's also an office selection form. This selection form is basically a list of all the positions that there are in office, and you're just going to rank which ones that you would prefer. So, if you would prefer to be the secretary over the historian, you would put secretary as your first choice and historian as your second, and so on with all the 7 positions that we have open. And then finally, there is an office your agreement. This agreement is just to make sure that you are willing to maintain the behavior that all Indiana HOSA officers have when they're in office, and that you continue that behavior, that good behavior, throughout your time in office as well as beyond. Along with this election packet, you upload things to Tallow. Tallow is our main upload site for both competitive events as well as officer applications. So if you just go to Google or which browser you use and type in Tallow, you should be able to find it, but it's also just tallow.com. And if you don't have an account already, then first things first, make an account. And then you're going to upload both both recommendation and your introductory video, but you're also to upload an academic transcript. These are just your grades throughout your high year, or maybe if you're in college, your college career, as well as a resume. And we do have some answers to sample questions. And these questions aren't hard, they're mostly opinion based, but they're just also going to help us get to know you a little bit better. There's also a HOSA digital badge that you have to upload. If you've already paid your $15 in membership, then this won't be a problem. All you do is just click on the little digital badge, and then you are a registered HOSA member. So before we continue, oops, my bad. I am actually going to show you the officer election packet if you don't have it already. So here's the front page. And here you go. There's just the things that you have to turn in and then the things you turn into Tallow. So here's what the application and nomination form looks like. Of course, here's all the like your name, your grade, home address, where you live, And if you have held a local office, so if your local hosts a chapter, you hold office there, we definitely want to know that. If you don't hold office, no big deal. Just leave that point blank. But we do want to know if you have held office. And then some of your honors and awards. This can be anything that you have earned throughout your time in high school, college, wherever. Other activities, if you play a sport, if you're in performing arts, choir, anything like that. And then some other organizations that you might be a part of. Then, of course, statement of support and look statements. And we'll talk about here in just a moment. Here's the employer notification, and then the travel policies and agreement section. So there's all of that. And then here's how to join Tallow. Um, it goes much more in depth than I've gone. But once you get your election packets, this is all the things that you will have to do to get Tallow. It's really not that hard. It's just you have to search for it. And then we'll talk about the interviews here in a moment, but you will have to do an interview. So these are the things that we rank you on. Of course, these are the things that you will have already turned in. Then this is the interview rating sheet, technically for the nominating committee to score you on. But if you are applying for office, I would suggest using this as a checklist before you go into your interview and think about what these things can do for you, and make sure you check off that you have appropriate posture, that you have appropriate dress, that you check all of these things off before going into your interview so that you can be confident. And then finally, here's the office line. Like I said, you just rank these 1 to 7. If you aren't in college, I wouldn't really recommend putting this as your first choice, as this is our college representative post secondary. But this is just, that's what the office selection looks like. Okay, so we will go back to the PowerPoint. Oh my goodness. Sorry, everyone. Oh, there it is. Okay. So, the candidacy exam. There is an exam. I know that's not what everyone really wants to hear, but we just have to make sure that you know your stuff. This is a written exam here, but honestly, because of COVID, it will most likely be virtual. It's going to be on the computer, and it'll be a proctored exam. And these are the things that we recommend that you study. So, National HOSA, recommend that you study who's on the board of advisors, who is the current National HOSA president, things like that, as well as the HOSA handbook. You can just, again, go into Google, type in HOSA handbook, and it'll be the first thing that pops up. You want to study HOSA history, so when was the first state conference, or when was the first national leadership conference? Some of the chapter management that are in the HOSA handbook. We also recommend study a little bit of parliamentary procedure. Parliamentary procedure is one of the competitive events we have here for Indiana HOSA as well as National HOSA. But parliamentary procedure, there's not a lot on the exam, but we just want to make sure that you know some of the basics of parliamentary procedure, because that is a thing that we use very rigorously as state officers. And we recommend just take notes, make a study guide. I really like Quizlet, or flashcards, written out flashcards, but just make sure that you study a little bit so that you can be prepared for this candidacy exam. And then here is our live state leadership conference schedule. So there are 3 days that we're going to go through. And so day one is that's when you're going to do your interview. We will have all the candidate orientation. We're going to get you set up, and then we're going to go right into interviews. The nominating committee is going to interview you. We'll go one by one, and then right after that, there will be a luncheon with me and the rest of the state officers. After we're done with the interviews and we're done with lunch, we're going to slate you, and that's the 1 through 7 on the officer election packet. But slating is basically the idea that we're just going to put you where we think you're going to fit. Um, and this will have you competing against officers. So there might be two people who we think would be good for historian, and then that's what people are going to vote on. You might be slated against two or more people. You might be slated against no one. But that is going to be announced live, and then right after that, you're going to start to campaign. You're going to want to get people to vote for you. And then at our opening general session, is at the end of the day of day one, you're going to have your 2-minute speech, and you get to present to everyone who attends the opening general session. And the 2-minute speech is going to be about the theme for the year, which is Unlock Your Potential. So that is day one. Day two is voting delegate orientation. You guys who are planning on being a candidate. You're not going to be on the voting delegates um, panel, but you guys will be lined up panel style, and the voting delegates will get to ask you questions about yourself, about what you plan to do in office. They just get to know you better so that they can make the right decision when they're voting. Throughout the day, you're going to continue to campaign. You want to get people to vote for you. And then we get to the business meeting. So, this business meeting, we're going to recognize all of you. We're going to say, here's who we have as the nominees for president elect, vice president, and so on. And that's where we vote on you guys or on the candidates. And then at that second general session, the votes are going to be taken by then, and the results are going to be announced, and you are going to be installed. So that is day two. Day three is our closing general session. This is bright and early in the morning. And you guys, as newly elected officers, are going to rehearse with me and the rest of the state executive council, and you're going to assist during this closing general session. This is where we do awards and presentations and things like that. You're just going to help us out. And then right after the closing general session, right after that, we're going to have that transition meeting. We are taking you guys right in there. We're going to exchange our contact information, just going to give you a little bit more information about your role and some of the duties that you have to do. Um, and then you get to go home as a state officer, which is pretty cool. So, in case there is a virtual state leadership conference, this is the schedule. It's all things just on different days and or different times. You can see that the slate is posted and candidate orientation on that first day, voting delegate orientation, opening general session on that second, and then business meeting and voting second general session on that Friday. The only thing that it's really changed is that transition meeting that's on that Saturday. So, some things to think about. We don't want to deter you, but we just want to make sure that you are thinking about this. So you want to ask yourself, do you have the right grades? And another thing, can you maintain those grades while you're in office? You might have the right grades right now, but there are a lot of responsibilities that come with being a state officer. So you want to make sure that you can maintain those grades while keeping them at a high level. You also want to make sure if you can make these sacrifices required. We do have to miss school sometimes just a couple of days, but for state leadership conference, it's kind of a long time to miss school, especially if you are in pretty good classes, high ranking AP honors classes. So you want to make sure that you are willing to take that time off. And then, of course, do you have the appropriate social media? As a state officer, you're representing Indiana HOSA as a whole. So if you're posting kind of bad things, you don't have the greatest language on the internet, you want to make sure that, is that really the right choice for me as a state officer and a professional? So my story, obviously, this year hasn't been a very conventional year with COVID, but um, this year for me has been a great opportunity. Um, Going into HOSA, I didn't know that COVID was going to happen. I turned my application in thinking that we were just gonna have 2 weeks of quarantine and that we'd be on SLC in just a couple weeks and we'd be spending time at the Westin and having a lot of fun. Um, and trust me, we did have a lot of fun, but you know, it's not the start of the year that we all thought it was gonna be. But having this virtual has really opened not only me, but the rest of the officers and the members of HOSA to huge new opportunities. And I feel really, really grateful to be a something that is changing and that I get to leave my mark on Indiana HOSA. So that's just my that's a story that I really think might help some of you make your decision. I really hope that you guys choose to run for state office because it's changed my life and I know that it'll change yours too. So I'm going to pass this presentation over to our state officer coach, David Guffey. And he's just going to present a little bit more about state officer and state officer candidacy. Excuse me. So we are going to stop my share. It's funny. I'm a Gen Z and I can't work technology.
Well, I'm an old fogey. What do you expect from me? So, hi, everyone. It's pretty quiet in this room. Is everybody excited?
I know I am.
Yeah? So can you guys see my screen? I see some nods. Okay, let me present to you. How about that? Can you guys see? Let me do this. How's that? Good? So I want to make this interactive. So you guys can ask questions as you're thinking of them as we go through this. Please chime in. I mean, this will be, the most information you're going to be able to get from us in person here, obviously, for this opportunity because things are pretty virtual and from here on out it's basically emails and stuff like that if you have other questions. But as Julia said, my name is David Guffey. I work as part of Indiana HOSA staff. I serve as the state officer, coach, and staging director, meaning that your state executive council members, as they go throughout the year, we do a lot of leadership development and other opportunities with them. And so we try to help them and provide them with the resources they're going to need. I'm one of the primary contacts for that. So if you are elected as a state officer, we're going to be working really closely together for a whole year. And then, of course, the other roles I fill for Indiana HOSA staging director. That means that at state conference, fall conference, all the conferences, during the live events, the events that go on stage and so forth, that is coordinated through me. So, a lot of responsibilities there, trying to make sure that our members have a great experience when they go to the general sessions and to the conferences in general. So, a little bit about me, wondering maybe why I'm on here other than state staff. Well, to be honest with you, a long time ago, my journey began just like yours. My journey began in a little health sciences classroom in South Central Kentucky. I was a HOSA member, and I have been for about 35 years now. I was a secondary member at what's called, at the time, Russell County Area Vocational Education Center. And I know that's a mouthful, but little vocational center or a career and technical center in South Central Kentucky. Our classes were about 30, 35 members each. Had the best time of my life, experienced a life-changing event by joining this organization. And 35 years later, I'm still here. I was a member from the secondary level. From there, I graduated college. In the college at Western Kentucky University, established a local chapter there. And then, of course, when it came time to graduate, I'm in the illustrious alumni committee or community now. So I'm a HOSA alumni. So past 35 years, I've been actively involved in this organization. And Besides that, as state officers in your journey here, I can understand. First off, I was a local chapter officer at the secondary level. I served as historian and my local president, and then also as state president eventually too. And I also served as state parliamentarian for Kentucky HOSA. So I've been down that route as far as being an officer in this organization. And I actually had the honor to serve you as the National Central Region Vice President at one time. So I've seen this from multiple aspects, including at the alumni level, where I served the organization again not too long ago as the alumni director at large on the HOSA Inc. Board of Directors, which is the governing body of this organization. So you can see HOSA just doesn't stop at the secondary level, and HOSA has a lot of avenues for and opportunities for you to grow, to develop your leadership skills, your technical skills, to grow your social network and so forth. It's just been a tremendous opportunity and a life-changing event to serve as an officer. Besides serving as an officer, though, too, I was a competitive events participant. So I know that you may be sitting in the chair here tonight looking at this presentation and going, gosh, this state officer thing, that's a lot of commitment, but I'm also thinking about competing. You can do both. You just have to be disciplined. You have to be committed. When I was a competitive event finalist for HOSA, I participated in medical and dental terminology. That's a lot of written terms to memorize, and it's also especially medical terminology, the most difficult competitive event that we offer, simply because the number of participants that usually participate in those events. But I was lucky, to, in addition to serving as officer and being elected as officer, I actually won medals too. So again, all of this is possible, and all these doors will open if you are committed to this organization and you give it your all. So having said that, now you know a little bit about my background. Of course, the main question here in this workshop is officer candidacy. So, should I apply for officer candidacy? That's got to be the question in your head. And I want to walk through you some things to think about even further than what Julia has already presented to you. Julia has given you some definite things to think about, but from a state level perspective, from someone who's been in this organization for the past 35 years, it's something that I need to make sure that our officer candidates really think about and are definitely want to consider, because we want to make sure we have those members and officer candidates who are going to be committed to the organization. So the first one that we definitely are looking for is people who are passionate about HOSA. So, are you passionate about HOSA? That's a question I think you need to ask yourself. You're going to be serving us as a state level officer, so you have to be passionate about HOSA um, in order to serve us well. Um, Something to think about too is, how's the culture at your local chapter? If you are passionate about HOSA, some of the things we're looking at and looking for are people who are really improving and making the local chapter stronger. So we hope that your local chapter is strong, they're supportive of you, and they're also passionate about HOSA. And again, we want to have officer candidates that are want to make HOSA strong. So how have you made your local chapter strong? Have you promoted the activities? Have you increased membership, and have you helped fundraise? Those are very difficult things to do, for instance, during this time that we've been locked down during this pandemic. It's difficult to get the word out about HOSA. It's difficult to increase membership, and it's definitely to fundraise during these times. But all of those things definitely make your local chapter stronger, not only for this year, but for future HOSA members next year, for instance, immediately. So, we're looking for people who, have made their local chapter stronger. And of course, we're definitely looking for people who will put HOSA first among their daily priorities. When you become a state officer, it's a full-time job, um, so to speak. So there's going to be a lot of responsibilities for you. You are going to be responsible for help running the state organization on a day-to-day level. So are you ready for that? Are you ready to put in a full year of service with this organization? And I put ride or die in here because as a state officer and officer coach, and even have been a state officer in my time, my fellow officers were my ride or die friends, right? It was those things that when things were down or I needed someone to call or maybe a friend to talk to, man, there's nothing like your team to rally around you. So, and I would do anything for them and they would do anything for me. So it was really that mutual relationship with each other that we really liked. So, um, again, we're looking for people who will put HOSA first. And then of course, do you have support for this journey? Since it's going to be one that's going to take some time and take some effort on your part, especially during the pandemic portions here, and even in past that. Do you have support for what you're about to do? Do you have the support of your local advisor? Um, Especially when things you may have questions about HOSA or you may have questions about decisions you may need to make. It's nice to have support and people that you trust. Your local advisor should be one of those. Obviously, they're knowledgeable about the organization. They know you. You're in their class, so it's great to have their support. It's also great to have support from the local chapter members. I will tell you that when I was a state officer candidate, when I was first elected a state parliamentarian, and they announced my name, it was really touching and something I've always remembered how my local chapter just was screaming their lungs out at the state conference. I'm so happy that I actually got, elected and they supported me during those years. So, it was just a great time. And so it's great to have support of your local chapter members. Obviously, your school administrator, your principal, you need their support because, again, there's going to be some commitment there where you're going to be out of the classroom, maybe need to travel to different locations. So you definitely need their support in helping you on your that way. Also, your parents, you're going to need some support from your parents. Again, you're going to be home, you're going to be having these commitments, you're going to be starting to talk about things and think about things in a different way, and people are going to look at you and go, you're kind of changing here a little bit. You're talking this HOSA stuff all the time. What is this? And so it's great to have your parents support. And then of course, your employer too. You need their support on this and their understanding because, as Julia said, there's going to be times away from school, place times you're going to be traveling. You're going to need time off from work if you're employed, so you're going to need their support as well. So support's big in HOSA, and then of course friends. I mean, it's always great to have friends to talk about, your experiences and them encourage you maybe when you need it. So again, do you have a good support structure in HOSA? So let's talk about a little bit about travel. We'll talk about a little bit more in just a few slides, but when we talk about travel, well, do you have a dedicated means of travel? Now, what do I mean by that? Well, first, you're going to be expected to attend different meetings here in Indianapolis. So, do you have a way to get to us? Do you have your own vehicle? Do you have your driver's license? And if you don't have your vehicle and you don't have a driver's license, do you have someone that will help you and is committed to meet your travel requirements? So, something to think about there. Um, Again, I'm going to put this caveat here. We may continue to experience travel restrictions during your term in office as as the vaccines roll out, as hopefully we get back to normal. Um, maybe the first half of you being in office, we may be doing a lot of things virtually, but that's not the hope and that's not what we're thinking. But at the end of the day, as far as travel restrictions, we still have to look at that. But once those lift, or even during this time, you may be asked to come to certain things, and again, you got to have these dedicated means of travel. So travel is a big thing. Another thing you need to be aware of are expenses. Do you have money to purchase the HOSA uniform? Now, this may be something that you may not be thinking about, but again, that's why you're here in this workshop. You need to know something up front, and that is while the state organization will supply you with parts of your HOSA uniform, your official HOSA uniform, it isn't We're not supplying everything. You're going to be required to, for instance, purchase your dress shirts, your belts, your khaki pants, your shoes, your socks, and those kinds of things that are going to further complement and fill out your official uniform. So, do you have money and are you willing to purchase these items? Um, a little bit of behind the scenes here. Typically, if we're at a live SLC, we wear formal wear during the SLC for one of the sessions. So if you are elected as a state officer in 2022 at the 2022 SLC, um, are you willing to purchase the formal wear for the SLC? Also, again, as we're traveling to and from different events, the different conferences and so forth, do you have money to buy gas for travel? Can you purchase meals as you travel? And also, there will be times as a state officer where we will be spread out in different parts of a venue, especially in these live events. So, do you have the money and the means to purchase lunch or dinner or something like that? And can get reimbursed later, but you got to have that kind of money to travel on. So, from an expense perspective, these are some of the things you need to also be thinking about when you run for state office. Julia already talked about social media. She did say that you did represent Indiana HOSA, and if you are elected as a state officer, your social media will be monitored by people at the state level. It'll be monitored by myself. It'll be monitored by your state advisor, Eddie Erickson. Um, so are you willing to have your state of your social media monitored? That's something you need to think about when you run for office. Because again, as an officer, you represent Indiana HOSA, you represent our members, you actually represent the state of Indiana. So we want to make sure that what you say, the appearance you give and so forth is a good reflection of our organization and our values. All platforms will be monitored. It's not just, for instance, Facebook or Instagram, it's everything while you're in office. And while you're in office, we also then expect you to increase our social media footprint. Make sure you have regular posts to different social media outlets of the current events, of local chapters and so forth. So to promote the organization. So again, as an officer candidate, think about this in regards to social media. A little bit deeper. State officer life. Do you think state officer life is glamorous, perhaps? Maybe you have this conception. I know that in times past, as officer candidates or even as members, when I was a state officer, even a national officer, I've talked to members and they think some funny things. For instance, they think officers eat at fancy restaurants all the time. Where we've got white tablecloths and we got the full spread of all the glasses and dishes all the time, and maybe we're eating steak. That's far from the truth. We do not eat at fancy restaurants all the time. I'm glad, and we're all glad to get a hamburger at McDonald's, for instance, and covet those at times. So we don't always eat at fancy restaurants. Also, shocker, we don't always ride in limousines. we have, we have our own cars too, and we travel back and forth. We're not riding in limousines. A lot of times, it's pile as many people in a car as you can and drive from place to place. So sorry, we don't ride in limousines either. And another one that we typically get is members think, especially at state conference or even at fall conferences, that maybe we're in hotels and we have these big, vast hotel suites. I hate to tell you, that's far from the truth too. There's 4 people to a room if we can get them, and 2 people to a room or whatever it is. We try to economize there. We don't have separate hotel suites. We got normal rooms like everybody else. So at the end of the day, we're not living high and glamorous and so forth like that. So, and actually we end up in unique areas of the facilities. Typically we're in the back and in the kitchen area or in some hallways and so forth as we go back and forth. So state officer life isn't exactly all that glamorous. So do we have any questions so far?
Yes, please, if you do have any questions, feel free to shout out. Feel free to put them in the chat if you want to. You can message me privately if you want to. Um, yeah.
If not, I got some more here. So I just wanted to pause. Let me go another step further. So, um, as a state officer, what is life like? First off, I don't want to scare you and I don't want to deter you, but I need you to understand that typically as a state officer, you can expect some long days and you can expect some short nights. Now, what do I mean by that? Most of the time as a state officer, you're going to be spent are going to be spending, it's going to be for preparing for our different events. You're going to be making PowerPoint presentations, you're going to be writing speeches, you're going to be doing, a lot of homework, if you will, before you even get to the conference. And then when we get to the conference, most of our time is spent facilitating, setting up, tearing down, making sure we have pencils and paper and everything that we need. And then of course there's some rehearsing too. We want to make sure that all of our technology works and so forth. So that takes a lot of time. Also, lots of walking and lots of standing as we go from room to room, or we're standing and helping and so forth like that. That also leads to a lot of long days, and so it's quite often when we're at events like state conference or fall conference. If these were live events, we only get 3 or 4 hours of sleep a night. It is what it is. I mean, we have a lot of things that we need to accomplish and need to make sure that our members have the best experience possible. And with that also, there's going to be long stretches in between meals. Times, we may eat breakfast at 6 o'clock and then not eat again till 2 in the afternoon. Or then we won't eat anything till about 10 at night. So there's going to be long stretches between meals. Um, what also comes with the job is high stress, unfortunately. Um, there's going to be stress because you do have a public image as a state officer. People will know who you are. It's not uncommon to be in a restaurant. People know and recognize you. High stress from public speaking, workshops, and conferences. High stress from meeting potential sponsors and lawmakers. If we actually go to Washington, D.C., and actually get to meet congressmen and women, and advocating for career and technical education in HOSA, there's some stress there, and understandably so, especially if you've only done it once in your life. Meeting local chapters and officers, and then also meeting the demands of school and your family, and then also of your officer teams. There's expectations there. There's going to be some high stress times as a state officer as you try to juggle all of these responsibilities. Time away from work. Now we've talked about it. I want to quantify it a little bit. Just how much time are we actually talking about here, David? Estimated 41 days a calendar school year, or I should say a full school year, is what you can expect away from school. And to break this down for you and give you a little bit of perspective, after you're elected as a state officer, officer training happens in June. That's typically 5-day event, followed by also in June, the International Leadership Conference. That's typically a 7-day event. I don't know at this point if it's going to be a virtual or a live event, the International Leadership Conference. So we may be going somewhere, we may not. But at the end of the day, we will still be participating as a group at the International Leadership Conferences. Then also, if we go again to Washington, D.C. for the national organization participating in the Washington Leadership Academy, that's typically a 4-day event in September. Also in September, we have the Indiana ACTE conference. That's typically a 2-day event here in Indiana. Then we have our fall conference in October. That's typically a 4-day event. We usually have a 1-day and a 2-day conference, so that's 3. We pull you in a day before to prepare for that. So expect 4 days, to help with that state level event. Winter Rally, of course, it's a virtual event this year. If it is a live event, that's a 2-day event. Again, we pull you in day before, and then typically Winter Rally, if this was an in-person event, would be a 1 full day, followed then by the ACTE National Policy Seminar in March. That event, if we go to that, is in Washington, D.C., where we advocate for career and technical education and the impact on student organizations on yourself and also like HOSA. So that's typically a 4-day event in March, just before then the state leadership conference in April. Again, that event, again, if that's a live event, we're typically together for 6 days. We typically come in the weekend before the event to prepare everything for the grand finale for our state year. And then besides all of those different activities, we are mandated by our bylaws to have 4 events to meet as an executive council and meet on Saturdays here in Indianapolis. So those are something else you need to think about, is that when we have our executive council meetings, those are going to be on Saturdays. And then if you're fortunate enough to visit a local chapter, if we're requested to go out and help our local chapters to do local chapter visit, as a state officer, we expect you to visit at least one of those if we have those opportunities. So at least one day for chapter visits, and then other miscellaneous HOSA functions that we have that haven't captured here, things like the Lego drive and so forth that we typically have. There is at least 2 other days that you'll probably be gone away from school or involved. So all in all, when you take a look at the Indiana HOSA program of work and our year, as a organization, as a group, we will typically be away from school and work and our families and so forth, an estimated 41 days a year. So again, it's rigorous, it's great, it's lots of fun, it's lots of work too. So again, expect that kind of time commitment to the organization. So having said all that and wrapping this up, you got to ask yourself, are you willing to sacrifice the time, the money, the blood, sweat, and tears into this organization to serve us as a state officer? Because that there is sacrifice here. It's well worth it. I will tell you that it changed my life 30 some years ago. It's changed the lives of countless other young men and women in this organization for the past 40 plus years. And I wouldn't trade a moment being away from my family and friends and work and everything for it, because I get so much back in return from you guys. So that's really all I have. So now, again, if there's other things that you guys have questions about, please ask so that we can help you.
Yep, if you have questions about HOSA, about me or my team, you can feel free to answer those. I've answered some questions in the chat, so if you wanna send any to me privately, that's cool too. Um,
Sure,
but
I'm gonna take a look at some of these too.
mhm,
Right.
make sure I
So
answered them right.
yeah, that's the other thing I'm checking on too. So we had someone ask about age. How old can you be to apply for a state officer? Now, to be a state officer, it's for secondary and post-secondary. Now, we don't have a mechanism for middle school members to be a part of this state officer team. So if you're a middle school member here as part of this, please understand that may change. And the reason that we don't have that now is that at the national level, we have to follow the national level. The national level does not have that mechanism. So at the end of the day, if that happens at the national level, Indiana HOSA will follow suit too. So you have to be a high school secondary member or post-secondary to be an officer in HOSA. Are our conferences this year online? That is still being decided. You need to check with your local chapter advisor there. Last year was the first year it was virtual. All the years, the 40 plus years before that, everything was live. So, again, we have to take into account everything with the pandemic here, what legally we can and can't do, but also keeping in mind we need to keep our members safe, right? And so a final decision on that should be coming out really, really soon. So make sure you talk to your local advisor about what's the latest status. Is state virtual or is it live? Let me take a look. I think I got it. Any other questions? Again, please feel free, come off mute. Let's talk.
Where can we find the election packet?
The election packet should be sent to your local advisor. The local advisor will receive emails from the state advisor, Eddie Erickson, containing all the information about state conference, agendas, registration information, along with that officer election packet.
If you wish for me to send it directly to you, feel free to put your email address in the chat and I can send that over to you as well.
Are you guys surprised about the information that we've provided to you, especially in regards to officer life, the time away from work, and so forth?
I can say when I first got some of this information, I was definitely surprised and I wasn't really expecting it. Um, but I know that, you know, it may seem like a lot and it is. It is, but it's nothing that you can't do. That's what I've told, myself and the rest of my team. It's nothing that we can't do. Like, it is manageable. You just have to put in the work and have a dedication to be able to do it.
I feel from a state perspective, it's the pandemic here and being virtual has given you guys a little bit of a blinder as far as what state ops are like and what these events are like because you haven't attended them, right? So you kind of don't know what to expect. And God bless this year's state officer team. Julia and her team have done a tremendous job handling this obstacle that we've all been dealt. Even running for office last year, they did it all virtually, and it was a first. And uh, you know, I don't know if I, when as a secondary member, you know, if the roles were reversed, we spend back 30 years ago and we had all of this. Of course, we didn't have this technology, but if we did, right, it would be something to think about in regards to planning and how to execute it and so forth. But I encourage you that, if it at all looks interesting to you and, if you've enjoyed the content that we've put out at our fall conference here at Winter Rally, if you've gone online to their websites and so forth, and you've seen some of our material and pictures and so forth, it's a tremendous amount of fun and it's something that you definitely can overcome. I was a shy, backwards little poor boy in South Central Kentucky, the only dude in the whole classroom, right? Getting involved in this organization and everything was a bit of a push for me and to break out of my comfort zone. But again, I wouldn't trade it for the world, and here I am these many years later for it.